and charity one towards another. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable Senate now resumes its sittings, and before we start with the business of the day, I'm going to ask the clerk, and I'm sure that you all will agree with the proposal that the clerk writes to the family of former Member of Parliament Easton Douglas to express the condolence of the Senate on his passing. I had the opportunity to represent the Senate there at the funeral yesterday, and I know a number of members were there, but Madam Clerk, could you write appropriately? And also to Member of Parliament Michael Phillips on the passing of his mother, who was someone who was known to many of us, certainly myself, as a lovely lady and someone who has made a contribution within the cultural field of Jamaica. So you could do that, Madam Clerk. Thank you. And in our absence from the chamber, one of our members was elevated, so congratulations, Mr. Crawford. See you nice. For some inexplicable reason, you have chose to wear a green tie this morning. Oh no, it's not green, it's yellow, sorry. I don't know why I thought it was green. Oh well. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Ministry Paper number 74, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, dated June 4, 11, 18 and 25, and July 2, 9, 16 and 30. Ministry Paper number 82, an annual reports of the Planning Institute of Jamaica for the years ended March 31, 2016 and March 31, 2017. Ministry Paper number 83, an annual report of the Casino Gaming Commission for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 84, an annual report and audited financial statements of the Financial Services Commission for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 85, the National Seed Policy and Action Plan. Ministry Paper number 86, an annual report and audited financial statements of the Institute of National Development for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 87, an annual report and audited financial statements of the Sugar Industry Authority for the year 2015-2016. Ministry Paper number 88, an annual report for the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 89, an annual report of the Cayman Islands Tract Limited for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 90, an annual report for the Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation for the year 2016-2017. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Kingston Free Zone Company Limited for the year 2016-2017. Annual report of the Development Bank of Jamaica Limited for the year 2016-2017. Auditor General's Performance Audit Report on the Students' Loan Bureau. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Montego Bay Free Zone Company Limited for the year 2016-2017. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Sports Development Foundation for the years 2014 and 2015. Performance audit report of the Jamaica for implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Professional Engineers Registration Board for the year 2016-2017. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Toll Authority for the year 2016-2017. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica for the year 2016-2017. The Emergency Powers Number 2, Continuance Number 3, Resolution 2018 under the Emergency Powers Act. And for information, the law reforms zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 5, Order 2018, and the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 5, Order 2018, under the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures Act 2017.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Nothing. Petitions. I'm sorry. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives, Madam Clerk.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 18th day of September 2018, a bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm the Imposition and Collection of Fees by the Transport Authority in good faith and inadvertent as to their being unlawful during the period commencing on the 1st day of December 1989 and ending on the 8th day of December 2015, to indemnify the government and the Transport Authority and every person acting on behalf of the government or the Transport Authority from liability in relation thereto for connected matters, was passed in the House of Representatives without amendment. Signed, Pernell P. Charles, CD, JP, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Transport Authority Validation and Indemnity Act 2018 read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Leader. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Question.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. The Emergency Powers Act, under the Emergency Powers Act, the Emergency Powers number 2 Continuance, number 3 Resolution 2018. Whereas, by virtue of Section 20, subsection 1 and subsection 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that the action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 18th day of March 2018, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the areas of the parish of St. Catherine specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2018 for securing the essentials of life to the specified areas in the parish of St. Catherine during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2018 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 27th day of March 2018 and in the Senate on the 29th day of March 2018, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency declared as aforesaid and the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of July 2018, and whereas it was thereafter resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency declared as aforesaid and the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations remain and continue in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of October 2018, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned should remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of January 2019, and B, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2018 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers No. 2 Continuance No. 3 Resolution 2018. 2. The state of emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 18th day of March 2018 shall remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of January 2019. 3. The Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2018 are hereby continued in force until the 2nd day of January 2019. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for suspension of the standing orders to take this motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Mr. President, it is intended today to proceed with the notice of which I just gave a few minutes ago, and to also take the validation bill in relation to the spectrum fees, the telecommunications. Spectrum.
Standing orders to enable to take
I'm about to do so, sir, but I was simply advising of the matters before us on the agenda.
I didn't accuse anybody of being a bit rusty after the summer holidays.
I may well be a little rusty, Mr. President, although I did not get to take the break that I had planned to take. Notwithstanding, Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Thank you, Minister. The question is for the suspension of the standing orders to enable the Minister to take the motion, notice of which had been given earlier. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Minister.
Mr. President, I rise today to present the Emergency Powers Continuation No. 3 Resolution 2018, which seeks to continue the enhanced security measures operating in St. Catherine North. Mr. President, as we will all recall, the Governor-General declared a state of public emergency for St. Catherine North on March 18, 2018. This was then extended by the Parliament, including the current period, which expires October 2nd, 2018. Today it falls to us once more to consider an extension of these measures, which have proven thus far to be a highly effective tool as we battle crime and criminal elements in our society who perpetuate unconscionable violence. Mr. President, the effectiveness of the state of public emergency is undisputed. Since this year, and in fact up to September 19th, and particularly since the declaration of the state of public emergency, the St. Catherine North Division has experienced a 21.2 reduction in the number of murders and a 35.5 reduction in shootings when compared to the same period in 2017. Overall, the incidents of murder, shootings, robberies, break-ins, larceny, and rape have declined by approximately 32.3% in St. Catherine North. Another way to look at what has been happening in that space, Mr. President, is to note that 82 murders and 72 shooting incidents were recorded over a period of 160 days prior to the state of emergency, while during the first 168 days of the state of emergency, 27 murders and 22 shooting incidents were recorded. Another important statistic to note is that the national murder rate has declined by 20.2% as at September 19, and that statistic is certainly impacted by the successes of this state of emergency. Mr. President, success of the state of emergency does not mean that we are where we should be. The successes attained thus far does not mean that we are where we should be. Yeah. And even as I quote the statistics that are before us, it's inescapable that I think about the news to which we all woke this morning, where young James Johnson, a pastor, was shot in his church, which is located within the state of emergency. Mr. President, he was known to many of us. He was known to many of us in here. And it's unthinkable for persons who may have just interacted with him yesterday or a few days ago, that someone of the energy and love of life as James would have his life snuffed out. We understand that anecdotally even, we have understood anecdotally that even among gunmen, there used to be rules. Babies, pregnant women, elders, churches were sacrosanct. Certain things should not be. Violence should not be perpetrated against persons within those categories or in those places. But it seems that those rules don't exist anymore. It seems that it should go without saying that if everything is out the door, if there are no barriers to violence, then the state must assert extraordinary measures, because it must be that Jamaica returns to a place where you can go to church at 5 o'clock in the evening to teach a class and not expect, not fear, not think that it could reasonably occur that someone will enter behind you. 7 shots to the back, it is reported, in a church. We're not living in normal times, Mr. President. Not to overstate the point, but I just want to take this opportunity to personally, on behalf of the Senate, I'm sure, extend to his family and to his mother, to his friends, our deepest condolences. And I truly hope that the security forces will find the perpetrators of this murder and bring that person to justice. Mr. President, it's important that we never forget that there are people behind the numbers. The lives that are lost, the lives that are saved. When we speak about the statistics that go behind the decisions that the security forces made when they recommended to the Security Council that this state of emergency be extended, there are people behind these numbers. State of emergency does not solve everything. Does not solve everything because these problems are deeply entrenched. But it's not an academic discussion that we're having in the Senate. We're talking about how we get back to a place of peace and safety where normal policing can suffice for communities. Mr. President, that being said, I am going to return to some numbers and I'm going to return to the presentation which I've prepared. Mr. President, I want to look at the arrests executed in St. Catherine North during the state of public emergency. Between March 18, when it was declared, and September 19, the security forces arrested 33 persons on charges of murder in respect of 29 reported cases. And while during the same period last year we note that there were 29 arrests only out of 70 reported cases of murder. 33 persons have been charged in respect of 29 murders. Remember, if one person hold a man and one person shoot, two people can charge, right? Okay. So I'm saying 29 arrests out of 29 arrests out of 70 reported cases last year, and 33 arrests as attached to 29 reports of murder, 29 murders. Okay, this year. And I also want to point out that out of the, well, let me leave that number there, those numbers. But Mr. President, earlier this week, our Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, called on us to strengthen our resolve as the criminals have demonstrated the extreme lengths that they will take against the defenseless, especially our children. He called on us to show our resolve by using extraordinary measures such as this state of emergency in these abnormal circumstances to demonstrate that we have the stamina, the will to sustain the fight against them. Mr. President, we cannot back down now, not when we are making inroads. Every win on the battlefield, Mr. President, goes towards victory in this war against crime. So we need to be clear, not only to ourselves, but to the Jamaican people, on why it is that we have this state of emergency and why it is we wish to continue it. Context. Mr. President, as we have stated before, it will not go on forever. It is not the long-term plan. It is not intended to interfere with the rights of residents to enjoy freedoms to which they are entitled. It is, however, required to get us to a place where normal policing can succeed and where persons can freely enjoy the life to which they are entitled. So I will remind you of what it is that extending the state of public emergency will allow us to achieve. It will continue to reduce major crimes and to save lives. It will continue to reduce minor crimes, which we cannot ignore, as they are critical to restoring the rule of law and public order. Mr. President, it will continue to give our security forces the opportunity to gather intelligence, to weed out criminals, and it will continue to give our detectives the time to focus on existing murder investigations so that they can build better quality cases for prosecution. Mr. President, enhanced security measures will continue to reduce the level of fear which our communities suffer, and to get us to that place where residents in communities can walk their children to school in the morning without fear. Yes. And yes, go to church in the evenings without fear. Yes. Mr. President, I want to pause here to say and to emphasize that we have heard the calls of small businesses regarding business hours and of persons within communities regarding the need to extend the operating hours within the state of emergency. And we recognize this as a valid concern, and it is one which is being considered. The Prime Minister has asked the Minister of National Security to have discussions with the heads of the security forces to consider what can be done without impacting the fight against crime, to look at the areas in a closer way and to look at the circumstances to see what, if any, adjustments can be made without prejudicing the fight against the criminals. Mr. President, as noted earlier this week, state of emergency is necessary on the advice of the security forces to satisfy the short to medium term objectives of a secure Jamaica. The transformation needed for St. Catherine North and Jamaica as a whole will take time and will take deliberate effort to undo the impact of criminal activities as they have subsisted over decades. We must remain committed and we must demonstrate our commitment to this ever so important mission. Mr. President, we need more time. The security forces need more time to realistically address and erode crime and violence in the relevant areas in St. Catherine North. As I close, Mr. President, to hear the views of others in this chamber, I want to take this opportunity to thank the security forces for their hard work and dedication. If there are any listening at this point in time, I want them to know, they must know, how much the people of Jamaica appreciate their work, how much we in the Senate appreciate their work, and how much the people in the communities that have greater freedom as a result of their presence, how much they appreciate the work that they put in and the role they play in keeping us safe. They do, and we want to grow the economy so that everyone can be paid the worth, paid the worth of their work. Mr. President, it is with this that I commend the regulations and the resolution to extend the state of public emergency in St. Catherine North to members of this Senate for their approval. I thank you.
It's all right. So, President.
Thank you very much, Madam. Thank you, Madam Minister. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Special good morning to you, sir, And I just want to express my gratitude to the members of the Senate who pretty much gave me 100% support in my efforts to be elected. And when I said 100% support, not only on this side, but equally on that side. You have people like Senator Delroy Williams, who acted as if he was a candidate himself. And you have people like Kerencia, who asked how she could vote. We're arranging to have Kerencia be a delegate for the next conference. But no, Mr. President, it reminded me that we really are not enemies in the Senate, because they had my interest at heart just as a colleague and as a Jamaican individual. And to that extent, Mr. President, I want my comments to be taken with that clarity that I equally don't perceive that side to be an enemy, in the same way that they don't perceive me to be an enemy. In fact, Uncle Ransford was admitted to the hospital because
he has asked me to ask you not to bring him into this thing.
His anxiety was so great. And his love for me so much. But I want to offer my own condolences to James, because James was a student, my sister, and by extension a student of mine. We often swapped classes. And I saw James on Wednesday night with Juliet Cuthbert at the All Angles. And he made a post that night congratulating me, etc., etc. And what it does is to really have you see how risky it is. Because there was no conversation, there was no direction, there was no assumption of the possibility. And that's what risk is, that the least likely outcome is so likely to happen. Therefore, a high risk situation. And this was a guy who was contributing to his society. This was a guy who was not born in wealth or anything, but he felt it necessary that whatever skills he garnered, and he was teaching, a voluntary teaching activity, and was gunned down for it. And it carried to my mind, 4 of us was in the room, Donna's husband, James, I, Mrs. Cuthbert was having her face done at the time. At any of the 4 could have been James. Any of us could have been. James could have been saying, I just spoke to Damien. And that is the difficulty that I have. And so, with things like these, and we don't feel equally aggrieved by all because we don't know all, but somebody feels as we are feeling now. Somebody feels the same misunderstanding, incapacity to comprehend why and why me. Somebody feels the same grief and sorrow for every single murder that happens, and almost every single death that happens. I see on TV all the time the anguish that the family goes through. I see on TV where people are crying and you can't even hear a sound. How deep the anguish is. That I see people say that they just don't know how to feel because they have not been able to comprehend that emotion. They have never felt it before. They can't describe that emotion. And it's for that reason why we don't only need to do something, but we need to do the right thing. We have to do the right thing. We have to be committed to finding the true solution. And the right thing, in sciences, we speak to ceteris paribus, the ability to hold other things constant so as to analyze if one thing is working. And at this time, we actually have 2 things happening at the same time. We have 2 things where we have the emergency powers and we have the increased police presence. Because the state of emergency don't in itself demand increased police presence. It only demands the emergency powers. So to analyze the impact of the emergency powers, one would have to hold constant the increased police presence. Or to analyze the impact of the increased police presence, one would have to hold constant the emergency powers. It is my opinion that the majority of the impacts that we have seen is because of the increased police presence. But the continued extension of the emergency powers will render us incapable to analyze if it is really because of the increased police presence. Had I had the opportunity to decide, which I don't have on this side, I would not extend for a period the police powers, the emergency powers, and analyze, maintain the presence, and analyze if the presence is a variable that is changing the situation. However, there is definitely a cost to losing an election, and one of those is that your principles, your philosophy, your ideas don't create policy. And so on this side, it is the government's ideas that create policy, and it is clear that this is at least a part of their long-term plan. And it's reasonable to accept that it's a part of their plan because it has taken up 1/3 of the period that the government has been in power. So if you say it's not long-term, it's difficult for it to understand what is the definition of long-term if something have existed for 33% of the time that you have been in power. And it's also reasonable for you to want to continue because there is evidence that there is some directional reduction, that you like what is happening, I like what is happening, Montego Bay like what is happening. And so therefore you want to keep going, keep pushing. Both as a party, politically it's beneficial, but as a government, you're also seeing results. I remember once I stood here to say that everywhere was going up in this place. I can't say that now. So you have seen where there's a reduction in almost 8 or 9 of the areas, 6 of which don't have a state of emergency. So you have seen results, and therefore you should be committed to these results. But let us go now to the science of it, to say what is the source of these results. But because, as I said, you're a government, and democracy demands that the government be allowed to do what they think is best. It is engineered, it is organized to allow the elected government to do what they think is best. And so therefore, I am not in a position to resist based on my own opinion. I can speak, I can suggest, but to resist what the government think is best. So what I want to speak on in this day is some of the ways that we may be able to improve the outcomes of this actual thing. Because there are many negatives that we have not been willing to engage with. But there's a negative of the wanton lockup of young men from established communities. And in this lockup, 15 to a cell, I don't know how much I've been to a lockup. It's the stinkest, rankest, nastiest place that you have seen. 15 men in a cell using a bucket for a number 1 and a number 2. And while a man might be able to go in the corner and do his number 1, I can't see how he does the number 2 and retain any level of dignity in a lockup. And in this lockup, a man who has not been a part of crime seeks the protection of a criminal because other than that, he's a Mariadine. Where him going for a spliff and come out dead. And him seek the protection of this criminal and by extension, all this criminal. Some returns. So when the criminals place hot, him have to keep the gun them because him owe a man having been exposed to the lockup. So with all the negatives that exist, how can we try to achieve as much positives as we can? Because it's clear that this will be almost a trend for the immediate future. Almost every 3 months, I am sure we're coming here to debate an extension. The public expect it, the government intend it, the police expect it, the people I expect it. And so if that is the plan, what are some of the things that we must look on to make that plan more effective and efficient? One thing we have to look on is the police and how motivated they will be, how effective they can be, and truly how they are being treated. Because in my opinion, they are being treated unfairly. They're being treated unfairly based simply on how a man should look at his job, the value of his job. And a person analyzes the value of his job by first looking on the remuneration and secondly looking on the outlay. So it's a ratio of my remuneration to my outlay, where the remuneration is not just the pay, but he looks at the growth potential and he looks in this case on his national contribution. The pay that they're getting is clearly too low. Clearly too low. But also the growth potential is almost nil. Many of them would tell you that they don't even get a promotion unless they're a friend of a friend. It's like a straight friend thing. So some people who are committed now, standing up in the sun and in the night dew for the state of emergency, being committed, will not be considered. And of course, many of us have depreciated their national contribution. We act as if they're insignificant and unimportant. Until we need them, they are the worst things in the world as far as we are concerned and how we act. We claim that they're all corrupt and thieves and waiting to stop us to take away our money, claiming that we were speeding. And until we have to dial 911, we don't actually, or 119, or I don't even know what it is actually. And one of the reasons I don't know what it is because I live in a gated community and so I'm not equally exposed to the criminal realities that exist. But what we're saying is, senators, we have to look at the remuneration of the police, because when you look at the outlay part, it has been increased dramatically under the state of emergency. So we have held constant the benefits. But when you look at the outlay, both current effort and risk, it has dramatically increased. I mean, the Senator Johnson Smith made the point that there used to be rules among criminals. There used to be rules that when the police come and talk to you, you're cool. There used to be rules that you don't actively engage unless it's to save your life. Those rules don't exist anymore. Because right now I read in the newspaper that a man had a grenade that he threw at the police. We have rules now where they have bigger guns than the police. We have rules now that a person, the police, when they finish a 50-hour week, which is the norm now, 50 and 60 hours a week, him taking a bus to go home. Within the space that a man will just shoot him because he's a police. Because he stopped him, look in the car, he now can identify more police without engaging directly with them. And we're not putting any situation for a police security after. And we assume they all have a gun, but many can't afford a licensed firearm outside of duty. So he's now exposed on a JUTA bus or a JUTC after standing for 24 hours watching and being identified by other individuals. When we look at what is happening, the food that they're getting, great complaint. One reported to me that their breakfast was unheated sausage from a tin with 2 boiled dumplings. If we intend that this is our strategy, it is only reasonable that we review how we are going to ensure the major component of the strategy is treated. If we intend that this is going to be our strategy, we must look at what the police are asking for in their salary negotiations. We are yet to even have an agreement with these police. And it has to be considered that their effort are going to be asked to be increased. As I said, the report, 60-hour work weeks are not unusual. And in this 60-hour work week, they have no remuneration for overtime. They are demanding that 40 hours be the acceptable work week, and we are unwilling to consider that. We have to look further on our targets. On our targets, we have been saying what we're trying to do to prevent the future criminal activities. And those future criminal activities can only be prevented if we remove the instruments of criminal activity. So while we have this police presence at the entry point and the exit point, if you're going to Montego Bay, you will buck up into it. We are not targeting the murderers. We are not targeting the guns. We are not targeting the ammunition. Because to this point, in 2017, we received or recovered 603 guns. To this point in 2018, we recovered 507 guns. Almost 100 less guns, in spite of the increased police presence, in spite of the increased spending, in spite of the lockdown. We have recovered 96 less guns in 2018 than in 2017. We have to now start to target the guns. So within this whole emergency powers, within this whole added police thing, we must be more strategic in removing the tools of criminal activity. We must target ammunition as well, because in 2017 to this point we recovered 14,090 units of ammunition. In 2018 we recovered 7,969 units of ammunition. So we have recovered almost 5,000, in fact almost 7,000 less bullets and other forms of ammunition. Our target is not clear. Our target is not clear because, and I hear Senator say there's an assumption that is the same amount that is out there. So you're suggesting that for some reason, without any statistical evidence, that we have less guns. But if we look at the past 5 years, we have been recovering almost equal amounts of guns. Now, we must also look at how much people we are arresting. And I heard about the 29, and we applaud that, the arrest. And we don't reach to conviction yet because the justice system and all that we have to look into. In 2018, to this point, we have arrested 9,870 individuals. In 2017 equivalent period, we arrested 10,658. So what is clear is that our targeting is inefficient. If we're going to make this work where the presence of the police exists, where we can enter into people's homes without permission, where we can carry a man in for questioning without having due cause, if we're going to make it work, let us start to target and increase our arrest of those who and charge. Well, it coming now to the likelihood of being charged would be those who are arrested with evidence. That if you arrest with evidence, that person is more likely to be charged. In 2017 to this point, 3,088 was arrested with evidence. 2018 to this point, 2,424 was arrested with evidence. So there seemed to be, in my opinion, a misuse of the opportunity because of a lack of targeting in how we are going about. So therefore, what I'm saying, senators, there is no intent on my side, nor on my path, for us to refuse the government's efforts to reduce crime. There is no intent on my part, and there's no intent on my side, to resist the right given to the elected government to do what they think is best. But I also feel that the government should consider, one, understanding the variable that is working by not seeking an extension for a period. You can always come back and seek an extension if you don't think it works.
Observative.
In a month you can come back and say, you know, we want back the emergency powers because the police presence alone is not sufficient. But also, I'm asking the government to consider the awesome role we're placing on the police force, the awesome responsibility, the awesome dependence that the society is having on the police force, and to properly remunerate them for that effort, to properly motivate them for that effort, and to properly recognize them for that effort.
Yeah, man.
In closing, I'm asking that we consider the communities that are suffering, the communities in Montego Bay still who can't keep a round robin. And we understand that because they can't keep a round robin, their events are likely not to be profitable. And that was ignored to give special exemption for large events, special exemption for a Sumfest, but no exemption for the individual's dance. And in St. Catherine it's the same. But understand that if we should extend the hours, we're also calling on police to do extended hours. Once it is a lock-off where the curfew is in place, then you need less policemen to circulate and to actually interact. Once there is no longer that similar curfew hours, you have to extend the police hours. And by extension, I ask that you consider the police force. I also ask that you encourage that based on their communities, young men are no longer scooped up just because of where they're from. But that there be some level of analysis, some level of intent in who you take. Because many are complaining that they have been treated like enemies, and therefore they now hold the state to be an enemy. And that is the fruit, that is the seed of gang entrance, the seed of violence creation, where a man perceives that the state is his enemy based on how it has treated him. So we welcome the reduction that has been reported in many spaces. We acknowledge the grief that has been prevented to many individuals. But we ask that we be a little more scientific in trying to find the right solution for this grave problem. With that, Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Crawford.
I just said something simple, not much. Just good morning.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, that's your seat, Senator Williams?
Yes, it is. Has been since day one. Mr. President, just a short point, just on something that Senator Crawford has said. I take the point about being scientific and trying to find out the real source of what I would call the success. But we have repeatedly made the point about persons behind the numbers. So it still has to be it's not an easy decision for a government to take, because lives are behind the numbers and persons are behind the numbers. And when you hold a variable constant in this case, the risk is that lives probably may be at stake. So it's, even though we are making the point, it's not an easy decision, and it's a decision that we have to take carefully. And also, the point I want to also make is that I'm not sure if you were exactly saying that, but you were saying or. And so it's as if it's one variable or the other variable. I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, but it could be and. So it could be that the success is from the increasing in the numbers of police and the state of emergency. So I'm saying, so it could be that, which means that personally for me, I personally would support the extension, because I would say in that regard, let's say it's given the possibility that it's that it's both together working to give the success. We still need more time to continue to gather the information and the data to see. So when you reach to the time of making a strategic decision to hold one variable, then you would have satisfied yourself that you would have given it enough time to say, okay, let's remove a variable now and see what is the result of that. So I still believe we need more time before we hold a variable, before we do the testing. Yeah.
Senator Williams, thank you. Senator Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of questions, actually. A state of emergency can't continue forever. So the question that I ask is, at what point is the government saying that the state of emergency will no longer exist? I need to know, what is the goal? Where does it end? And then secondly, I want to find out what replaces it. Because if it is that the state of emergency brings the situation to the point of some kind of comfort level where it can now be withdrawn, if it is withdrawn, something must replace it. Because if that replacement does not take place, then we are likely to have a recurrence of the difficulty that confronted us. What role do we have in all of this? Because our role cannot be confined to the specific area where the flare-up is, because we have to give some kind of immunity to other areas so that they too don't flare up. So what then is a wider plan? How is the society to be involved? What can I do as a citizen? What is expected of me? What can my professional group do? I don't know. In other words, the government does not seem to have developed an approach beyond the state of emergency. And it does not seem to have an approach that it wants to publicize, to galvanize support from the citizens beyond the state of emergency. So I with my anxiety to be a part of the solution, want to know what role I can play. I want to know how I can influence others to be a part of something, but I have to know what the something is. And what bothers my mind is that we don't seem to be going outside of the state of emergency in order to deal with that which is not confined to a specific locale. It is a national problem. National problem. Because I hear reports of problems in areas not covered by the state of emergency. What is that plan out there for those other areas? Because you see, when we look at the declaration, the declaration is made for public emergency where this exists, that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body or persons of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. That's the foundation on which a state of emergency is declared. So, what? Do we wait now for these elements to become present before we act in some other area? I don't know. I don't know. And I'm really pleading to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, let us know. This argument about you can't let the criminals know what your plan is absurd. It is unbecoming of a government to say something like that. When they had a difficulty in New York City, Bratton, then commissioner, and Rudy Giuliani, then mayor, they came out with a plan. And then they were able to deal with it because the citizens were able to be a part of it. They had a difficulty in Minneapolis. They used to call Minneapolis Murderapolis. It was the murder capital. They came up with a plan. And the plan was made public. Not all aspects of it, but relevant aspects which would cause the citizenry to be able to participate. What are we calling on the private sector to do? There are those who believe that it's the lack of opportunity why people, some persons resort to crime. In Boston, in the United States of America, they had a problem. And what they did was that they engaged the private sector and they answered that call. And the problem wasn't totally resolved, but it was brought to a tolerable level. So that wherever we have seen in developed societies a problem existing, there's a plan to deal with the problem, and there's the whole inclusion of the society to get up on a platform and to tell persons, well, if you see a crime being committed, let the police know. That's after the fact. That's after the fact. What can we do to help to prevent? That's all I'm asking. Your operational plans, some can be made public. Some must be kept secret. You know, my colleague raised the issue of guns, the recovery of guns. Are our ports of entry still porous? I don't know. I don't know. We had an intelligence arm of the police force called the National Firearm and Drug Intelligence Center to focus on guns and drugs because those were recognized as the twin evils contributing to a lot of the crime in the country. What is there in place? That was a secret organization. It was an organization with secrets. Wow. So I want to know what is the focus on guns coming in. We had once a contraband enforcement team equipped specifically to deal with guns and ammunition coming in. We used to have talks with the United States in relation to guns and ammunition coming in. I don't know what the situation is, because illegal export of firearms is an offense in the United States, and we mustn't confuse their attitude to the ownership of guns with the export of guns. Are we still in dialogue with them on that? I don't know. We used to speak about it so that it was well known. That's before the rift. So these are some issues that from time to time they bother me. And they bother me because I don't know. And the absence of knowing renders me inactive. So, Madam Minister, in Cabinet, persuade. Tell them you know what a plan is and you know what aspects of a plan. You don't have to be Minister of National Security to know it. What aspects of a plan can be made public? And say to them, you know, there has been a call for this because people genuinely want to be a part of the solution. But the obfuscation is alienating them. And this really has to stop. And the insincerity of the bleatings from the government, they're becoming now such that persons are saying, though you have the right to remain silent, if you don't speak up, one thing is going to result. We're going to usher you out.
Senator Charles.
Thank you, President. Mr. President, I very quickly just want to add to what the leader of government business and other colleagues have expressed as regards to Mr. Johnson and the loss, and send my individual condolences to his family. Mr. President, we are in a country that requires us as leaders to make smart decisions, tough decisions. We have to, at times, balance between our safety and our comfort, and as leaders we have to project based on the reality on the ground. Mr. President, I hear my colleague Senator Crawford speak about the science of it all, and as a scientist myself, Senator, I am an attorney at law. My first degree is in science, pure and applied science. So we can check the facts. one of the only persons who, let me leave it there. The reality is, you are so correct and at the same time so wrong, as many scientists are. But I appreciate exactly, I appreciate the sentiment with which you put forward your submissions. I, however, think it is important that the country and those listening analyze what you're saying with some clarity. You speak to the suggestion that the science shows that the increased police presence, in your view, is the cause for the impact and not the police powers. Is that not what you said? Your hypothesis is that the increased police powers and not increased police presence and not the increased police powers is the reason. And let me say this, because I know that Senator Knight was thinking it when you said it. Being someone so experienced, Queen's Counsel, former Minister of National Security, would tell you that it is not the first time that successive governments have spoken about increased police powers. Correct, Senator Knight? Matter of fact, when you were minister, when you were minister, you made efforts to increase the police presence and increase the police numbers, and you should be lauded for that. Ministers before you, ministers after you, have spoken about curfews, have spoken about the use of a range of police powers. Now let me tell you, one of the things that I learned in both law school and during my first degree in science is that the intersection between science and law is that you must base your analysis, you must ground it in fact that is accurate. If you are going to analyze, make sure that you are analyzing on facts that are accurate. The science behind all of this is that at the end of the day, no one can deny that the numbers, the results are proving positive. Is that correct? That's the science. At the end of the day, the science shows you. The fact is that this is not something that is pulled out of a hat. The police commissioner himself, newly appointed commissioner of police, Major General Anthony Anderson, says the state of public emergency is progressing apace and the operations are assisting to reduce murders. Listen to him. In the first one in St. James, the number of murders has gone down tremendously, and in St. Catherine, we expect the same thing to happen. He was correct, because the analysis of the science at that time was based and grounded in fact. He looked on what was taking place in the state of emergency before, and he could anticipate, and did so. The Prime Minister and the National Security Council received these submissions from experts who are on the ground. This is not something that is based in political theory and what we feel. This is not just a matter of pulling in elements and considerations of what we think is important. This is factual, and this is dealing with life and death. We do not have time to say to the country, we want to test if this can work. So I reject what Senator Crawford is saying. Jamaica doesn't have time to test if this can work. We've done enough testing of all of those things before. What we know is what we're doing now is working. But listen to the commissioner. And this is what he said in the past. And let's see if what it connects to today. The commissioner who took office on March 19th, in speaking, he said, the fact is, this enhanced security measures, it was instituted because of the situation. It's not just that the Prime Minister gets up and says, you know, I want to do something different to show that I'm young and energetic. No. It's not that he wants to show that he is just going to move the country in a different direction. The decision, my colleagues, senators, to institute enhanced security measures to implement the state of emergency was grounded in fact. It is grounded in science, and it is proving to be effectually positive. Senator Crawford, when you speak about Obia,
I wonder if you spoke to him before that event. Everybody wondering how you do it, you know. We have some vehicles.
You know, Mr. President, I was a debater in school. And whenever you debate and your points are cogent, your opponent usually tries to distract you with nonsense. Let me tell you something. Jamaica is watching us. And I want us to stick to the point and stick to the facts. We should not distract Jamaica or try to conjure up that science is on the side of some kind of hypothesis. We are dealing with fact. The reality is that when you are a scientist and you are experimenting, you would stick to what is the result, and you might want to find out why it happened. But the reality is, we know for the first time in Jamaica for decades, we are looking on the kind of reduction that seems sustainable. For the first time, we are looking on areas in Jamaica with 68% reductions in those areas. We're looking on science and not the obvious science. This is a reality. Mr. President, esteemed Senator Knight spoke to, he presented some questions to the Senate a while ago. And I want to remind my colleagues, because I believe the questions that were posed by Senator Knight are relevant. We already dealt with Senator Crawford's question. Senator Knight put forward some questions regarding what the government is doing. And it presents an opportunity for us to remind the country that it is under the leadership of our Minister of Education, Youth and Information that we have had the highest number of youngsters, at-risk youngsters in this country, vulnerable youngsters from communities receiving summer employment ever. We must remind the country that under our local government minister, the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, 3,500 youngsters receive summer employment opportunities. We must remind the country that it is this government that has increased the allocation in the Ministry of National Security by over 20%. Unbelievable. Never heard of before in the history of Jamaica. We have purchased ships. When you talk about border control, we have purchased the ships that have already proven scientifically to achieve results. We have a plane that is coming to assist with border control. We have an intersection of several agencies, multidisciplinary agencies and committees that are all focused on getting the guns. Ask JCF about the Getting the Guns campaign. When we speak about the fact that when you compare 1 year to the next, you're seeing less guns being found. Let's get scientific. Unless you can prove to me that the same amount of guns should have been in that area every single year, don't tell me about that. The only thing, the only fact that you can compare is that there's a 20.2 reduction. Same people. Matter of fact, Mr. President, what we can say is that there are more persons living in the area, more persons living in the area, and less murder. So let me take our friends to school. Because I taught too. There's not only one teacher in here. Call me Professor Charles from this day forward.
Professor Crawford.
Mr.
Number one VP.
No, please. Mr. President, let us remind Jamaica, and I thank you for the opportunity, that we have had increased mobility to the force, that we have increased recruiting, that we have now, we now have on the road motorbikes that nobody can say they don't see. You can't miss them. And all who don't like the color can stay home. Because it is proven in science. Hold on. Let us say this. Hold on and listen to me, my friends. Because I am going back to science. I am one person, my church brother, who you can say doesn't mix up politics in everything. Sometimes, but not all the time. And this time I can say to Jamaica, because I did the research myself. And as a researcher, I would expect that Senator Lambert Brown can also speak to this, and he can ratify what I'm saying, because I know nobody knows the research like Lambert Brown. He must have checked it. The research shows that the color that is used on the bikes and the vest is the premier, it is the most effective color for any visibility for a force of that kind. Am I correct, Mr. Brown? Am I correct, Mr. Brown? Am I correct, Mr. Brown? Come on. Anyway, I digress. Mr. President, the opportunity is taken for us to remind the country that, again, when we speak about treating with the reductions in crime and sustainable reductions, and what are we doing after the state of emergency, let us remind the country that we have increased even the number of police youth clubs, that we've increased the opportunities for our youngsters, that when we talk even about ZOSO, it is not just to go in and to sweep up and clear, but we have a very clear, cogent strategy of continuous engagement with our people. I want to remind the country as well that we have said in the 5-pillar crime strategy that was outlaid, swift and sure justice. And we won't mention the near $700 million that the Ministry of Justice has spent on improving our court network across the country. We can talk about the increase in justice of the peace so that poor, struggling Jamaicans can have access to get things signed without having to pay for it. We can talk about the increase in allocation and support through legal aid so that Jamaicans on the ground who can't access big lawyers can get support, and on and on. When you talk about crime prevention through social intervention, you're speaking about CSJP, you're speaking about National Youth Service, you're speaking about Hope and Legs and We Transform and NYS and local government program and Ministry of Science and Technology program, and on and on. When you're speaking about situational prevention, look on what is done across the country. When you're speaking about roadway access, that's not just about transportation. That's also about our safety and our security. Effective policing is number 4. And we've already dealt with that in relation to the mobility, in relation to the recruiting, in relation to introducing polygraphing so that we can raise the standard and quality of persons inside the force. When you talk about even the forensic lab has received increased investment and support from our partners so that our investigative capacity is par excellence. When you talk about rehabilitation, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, when we're dealing with rehabilitation, this government has spent the time to look on the juvenile justice system, to look on how we do our rehabilitation with offenders. I was so proud, Mr. President, to hear just this week that in addition to the work that has been done with DCS, Minister Floyd Green and Minister Ruel Reid has now opened transitional homes for the wards so that they can have assistance and support when they leave those institutions. Mr. President, let me tell you, Mr. President, as I come to a close.
Man, it's very impressive, man. Know him. Go on now, boss. Continue.
I await your silence, as a good teacher should to his class. Mr. President. You get the attention already, you know. Mr. President. We have to face our reality. Mr. President, anyone who believes that the battle against the criminals and the evil that exists, that can go into a church, that can pull a girl out of a car, that can rape an old woman, that can kill animal for no reason. Anyone who believes that the battle against that evil is going to be easy, or that it's going to be comfortable, or that it is going to be smooth, you have another thing coming. We, under the leadership of the Most Honourable Andrew Michael Holness, understand that defeat is not an option. Relenting is not an option. We understand that it will never, ever again, while we are government, be business as usual. And if it means that we have to extend and extend until we get Jamaica to where it deserves to be, then so be it. Doesn't Jamaica deserve that? Isn't Jamaica demanding that? Mr. President, now I believe is the time, and I take a line from my good friend. Let us press forward, not to Crawford, but let us press forward with Crawford too. I didn't like that line they're doing. It was good. But we got to come together. And I believe, and I like the way that the Senate started this morning. You know, anything I have become is because of you. Anything I've become is because of you. Nobody else but you.
Change it back.
Mr. President, as my colleague senator who started batting for the opposition said, we are not enemies. We are not enemies. Whenever I have heard submissions from Senator Scott Motley, I have to take notes. I have no difficulty in indicating that we have excellence on both sides. What we have to do is cause ourselves to remove from the politics sometimes. When I listen to some of the commentary, it's as if we forget that this is life and death. Life and death. Support for this is not just support for JLP. This is support for Jamaica. And I believe that the people in St. Catherine deserve every single police officer, every police power that they can get to stem the wave of crime and violence, and it is working. That is what we know. That's the fact before us. It is working. Mr. President, our intention is to ensure that criminals have to say to themselves, when they contemplate executing a crime, it's highly likely that I'm going to get caught. That will not stop all crime. State of emergency, curfew, we could increase by 500% the JCF. We wouldn't be able to stop all the crime, because you have some persons in every country who are very deliberate and who are very evil. And part of what we have to do is what we are doing in relation to raising our ability to investigate and convict, in relation to our ability to go into the schools with programs that cause children to not just regurgitate, but, as our minister said, be critical thinkers. We have all been upset at some point. Just last week, a taxi man cut in front of me just to turn left. Nobody else was on the road. And believe me, in my mind, I had to say to myself, it's a good thing I have something to do tomorrow. Had I not had something to do tomorrow, I would have definitely drive him down. But I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that, because I am focused on moving our country with our Prime Minister and team from poverty to prosperity.
Thank you very much, Senator Charles.
Mr. President.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. You know, Mr. President, when I listened to my friend, Senator Charles, I had to look good to see whether it was Admiral Bailey or really Colonel Charles thing. Because what I was getting was Ubakaba, science again. And so I want to, in my presentation, address some of the real science from the police department data. But let me start, Mr. President, by expressing my own condolences to the family and friends and colleagues of the pastor, Minister James Johnson, who was murdered yesterday evening in the church. A church that I have attended at least 2 funerals on Old Harbour Road. And Minister Johnson Smith, you're correct. Where is sacrosanct anymore in our country? Not the schools, not the church, not even at a funeral, and certainly not even in your home. The likelihood of going to bed with your windows open and doors open,
That's a theory.
and waking up in the morning and still being alive is a good question. It's still an illusion being pursued but never attained under this government. Mr. President, as I'll explain later on, the state of emergency doesn't guarantee us any preservation of life. There may be and there is a reduction in murders. Well, as you said, Minister, and I wrote it down, the state of emergency success don't mean we are where we should be. And you're right. You're right. Where we should be is at least 1,005 murders per year, as was in 2014. At least. Should be less. Should be less. But in recent times, since you and I have sat in the Senate, we have gotten as low as 1,005 murders per annum. That's certainly a benchmark within our time that we should be aiming for. A 20% reduction from the 1,644 of last year, the third highest in our history. 1,644 murders last year. A 20% reduction from that take us into 1,300. It doesn't take us to 1,207, the highest under Minister Bunting between 2012 and 2015. So we're way from what used to be lower numbers that we weren't happy with. But for you to be celebrating 1,300, and the applause being rung out in the face of James Johnson's death last night, I really wonder, are we for real? And I wonder that. I wonder that because the numbers, even if we get a 25% this year over last year, we'll still be in the 1,300 plus, which is more than any time under the previous government. At least set your sight on being better than the previous government, no? At least set your sight being better than the previous government. That is when you could talk about prosperity. That is when you can really talk about prosperity, that you are doing better than the 1,005 murders in 2014 when Peter Bunting was the minister. So let us, as I thought, we were sober this morning. Let's keep ourselves sober. Right? So the narrative, which even some in the media is buying into, about murder going down, must be put in the context that it is way above the highs for the 4 years of the previous regime. That was the time when the then opposition leader, Mr. Andrew Michael Onis, was saying you could go to bed and sleep with your doors open and wake up in the morning. He was critical of 1,205 and 7. He was critical of that. But under his leadership, we're far from what he was critical of. So I put that there because we need to put the reduction, which we welcome, in context. Because the truth is, in 2016 and 2015, under Andrew Onis' leadership, the murder rate escalated. 16 or 17. It escalated. That's just the reality. That's the science. That's the science. Go and look at the PIOJ publication. The numbers are there. Go and look at the police report. The numbers are there. So let us be clear on that. So we need to mash down that narrative. We need to mash down that narrative. Minister, I'd have hoped that this debate would have taken place next week. And that this debate would be next week after Minister Chang, as promised by the Prime Minister, announced the relief in measures that are negatively impacting the citizens in North St. Catherine. The Prime Minister has given a commitment. He hears the people. He hears the shopkeeper. He hears the barber, the hairdresser, the bar owner, the shopkeeper who is suffering because dance holder. Thank you. Right? He's hearing them because they're suffering. They can't run a business. They're going bankrupt because of the measures that are there. These so-called emergency power measures. Measures that we have no problem in easing up for big people in Montego Bay. Yes. But the people in North St. Catherine deserve that ease up too. They deserve that ease up too. And I'd have hoped that the Minister of National Security would make that announcement before you ask me to vote to keep those restrictions on the people of North St. Catherine. And so, I want to address that because I believe it would have been good if that announcement was made and we, the senators, were voting based consciously that relief was coming for the people. And, you know, let us be clear. Minister, President, North St. Catherine, for this year, January 1st to Saturday last, this is the police reports, they had a reduction of 19 murders, coming from 97 to 78. That's at 19.6%. That's a police data. That's a police data we have. 19. And they have a state of emergency. Let's take Manchester. Manchester, that's 16 reduction, 16 murders less, without any state of emergency.
We don't need none there.
Clarendon, 14 less, no state of emergency. St. Catherine South, 13 less, no state of emergency.
Low, comparing.
So what I'm saying here, it is clear that there can be a reduction, Senator Charles, even without a state of emergency. And this is relying on the police figures. That's relying on the police figures.
That's right.
So it's clear to me. It's clear to me. It's clear to me that this idea that you have a reduction of 19 murders, 19 murders less in North St. Catherine. 19 murders less in North St. Catherine is the justification for a state of emergency when we have approximately the same reduction in areas without the state of emergency. And citizens are complaining about the not just inconvenience, but the just difficulty of surviving. And we must listen to the citizens. We mustn't, because we have the power to pass these laws, just pass them and chuck them on the citizens. So the citizens are saying, we're tired of the long lines in traffic whenever the checkpoints are operating. That's what they're saying. They're tired of they can't do business. And they're losing resource capital. Listen to the citizens. They have a point of view. We don't know it all, and we don't have all the answers. And the Prime Minister, at least in words, say, I'm listening. We will announce new measures. All I beg for is bring the new measures before you ask me to vote on this. So in voting, I can be satisfied that the citizens are getting the relief they want. So I raise that because the police numbers are here. Last year was unusually high in St. James. That is where the bulk of the reduction is this year. And I'm thankful for that. But last year was not normal year in St. James. But what this tells us also, as Senator Crawford pointed out, if you put the available resources at the most difficult point, you will get results. And you can get it, as the other areas have shown, without the emergency powers. You know, Mr. President, let me be clear. Recently, the Prime Minister said criminals are on the run. And I laughed. I said, Prime Minister, you're not serious. Yes, there's a reduction in Montego Bay, but the criminals in Jamaica are not on the run. When they walk into that church yesterday, St. Ransford, and shoot that minister of religion with a state of emergency present, walk out having fired 7 shots and have not been apprehended, that certainly tells me that the criminals are not on the run and the Prime Minister is wrong on that. When on Sunday at 8 a.m. in Angels, just outside of Spanish Town, in the North St. Catherine state of emergency, a family is attacked by gunmen. 7 shots fired into that house. The female member of that household was injured and is in hospital. Just meters away from a police state of emergency post. The criminal walks away with his gun, like the one with the gun last night walked away, have not been apprehended. So I have to ask the question.
Why the powers?
Is it working? Are the gunmen really fleeing and running? There's an article in the Gleaner today. Criminals on vacation. I'd love to enter that letter into the record of the Senate without having to read it. Because that letter spoke clearly to the issue of the guns and the gangs, which is what we said last year that you need to go after if you're going to have a sustainable plan and success against the criminals, the guns and the gangs. So Senator Charles, when Senator Crawford tell you you're getting less gun this year, believe him. It's the police data. Yes. Not only is the police data, but the police admits, well, none of us even know how much guns out there. But one thing we know for sure is that more guns are turning up everywhere against the people. So, if we're going to, what is clear to me, yeah, let me make a point. Senator Charles, one thing is sure, 300 and odd people were murdered in St. James last year, 80% by the gun. How much guns have they recovered in the state of emergency in St. James? That's a fact the police have. It's probably... Look at the guns. How much guns they get in the state of emergency in North St. Catherine? The police have failed to get the guns.
Wherever they are.
They have failed to smash the criminal gangs. Those are the realities.
Wherever they are.
Right? So, what we are saying here, Mr. President, is that the strategy of the government is showing some reduction. But it certainly is not sustainable. It's not sustainable in this way. So long as the guns remain in the hands of the criminals, and the criminals feel free to kill without being apprehended, we have problems. We have problems. And that's what we need to focus on. And any plan we have, Senator Webby, they must report on these things. How much we are reducing the gangs, how much we are reducing the guns. That must be reported to the board of directors. Because that will tell us if we're making progress. It don't make sense somebody tell them selling ketchup, and they sell sailor ketchup good, and you ask them, oh good, and you discover it less than a month before. And the month before. No, it's not that ketchup not good, but they're not selling enough. That salesperson will be fired. So let us be clear where we're going. It's the guns and the need to convict the criminals. Those are the key. Mr. President, the killers out there are cold-blooded. They are dog-hearted. And they're still on the run. And they're still on the run. That's how I measure success. Have you taken them off the street? And sadly, we're not feeling that. The view is that they're on vacation, waiting you out, because they know you don't have the resources to continue the state of emergency forever. The temporary gains will disappear later on. Unless, and we are with you, you know. We want the crime down. So we're saying, listen to us. Listen to when Senator Knight tell you about the need for the plan. Let's get the plan. And Minister, I really hope that we're not going to be joining a new plan with people who don't like black people and people who oppress Palestinians. That's right. I want to make that clear. I prefer we deal with those who are governed by the rule of law. And therefore, the arrangement with the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada seems to me the preferred route. And I'm disappointed, Minister, when what I'm told is that there's a rift between us and the traditional partners. And I know it's easy to deny it, no rift. But so too, when we had the problem with a telecom company, and the contractor general made a report, we boxed the contractor general away and said we're going to implement it, until a tweet came from Ligini. We stand with the contractor general. That is what that tweet said. And visa start taken away, and the government back off.
That's a sign of it.
That's the reality. Oh, we need a real crime plan. One that put the criminals away, that take the guns off the streets. A crime plan which recognizes that the police force, Senator Charles, Senator Webby, Senator Gale, deserve more than praise from us. They deserve a real raise. Today, they are at Hero Circle at the Ministry of Finance. I hope from that meeting we will hear that there's a settlement, a decent settlement with our police officers. Senator Gale, you knew there was a time when Mr. Ushera and Trevor Monroe teamed up to get a real deal for the police officers. Yeah. You were there.
He sent it to arbitration, they got 85%.
Good, good.
45 years.
Yeah. That's it, the police.
So I am suggesting that you and I, if we really believe in prosperity, say to the state, do something good for the police force.
Yeah. Come on, we'll do it.
Minister, you said to me earlier that you need to grow the economy to do something good for the police. I beg to disagree with you. Beg to disagree with you. It's amazing that when it comes to looking after the police, we find excuse about growing the economy. But a single individual in the Ministry of Finance, not you, but a post similar to yours,
not you this time.
When you were there, President.
Not you this time.
A post called Senior Technical Director. You were just Technical Director.
That's it.
But there's a post Senior for which that individual, you're Senior too? But I bet you didn't know what was happening there. That there's a person, a single person in the Ministry of Finance who the government waived income tax of $780,000 per month.
What?
Not the salary, you know. That's the income tax waive.
No, I'm not joking.
$780,000 per month for 2 years. Sorry? For 2 years.
I never had a position.
Initial MT would come to your mind, President.
I was a civil servant.
No, the President understands. The initial MT, 780,000 per month.
Wait.
So how much is his salary?
The salary is obviously 2 million plus per month. Waived. 780,000 waived. Waived. Now they're going to tell us, because Senator Morris, when we asked about the contractor, the consultant, Minister Reid gave us data and said, oh, this particular individual, the government pays 30,000 US per annum for housing, but the salary is paid from abroad.
That's the real scandal.
But what he didn't tell us, is that our government, led by Michael Andrew Onis, or Andrew Michael Onis,
Anyway,
gives a waiver of $780,000 per month for income tax.
yeah. That could help fight crime.
No, that could pay some of the police.
Mr.
And we don't
President.
need to grow the economy.
Are you? That could have buy some.
So, am I still recognized by you, Mr. President?
Might I call for a point of order?
For the police force.
Did I hear a point of order, Senator Charles?
Yes, I didn't do it as vigorously as
Will
Senator
you
Brown.
yield, Senator?
But I'm simply asking, because it seems that we definitely are moving with pace, very far from the matter that is before us. And I also think that it is important to caution my colleague senator in relation to these speculative remarks that he is making. So I would ask, Mr. President, that we stick with the matter that is before the Senate at this time.
Senator Brown.
Mr. President, I want to be thankful of Senator Charles. He said that when you make a good point in a debate, somebody trying to distract it. And I understand as a good debater what he's doing. I understand that. But Mr. President, you and I know, because you were at finance, that what I am talking about is real.
That's right.
He doesn't know. Don't say
No. The president knows what I know. Not only that, Mr.
Sorry,
President.
Mr. President.
May I make the point, Mr. President?
Mr. President.
That this data.
Was there a ruling on the point of order submission that I made?
It was not point of
Because
order.
if it is so,
It was not.
then I will ask again. Because we are moving away
The point of order was taken. Senator Brown, would you
Thank you,
just
sir.
get back to this subject that
No,
would
this is the subject because it's about the police. Mr. President, Mr. President, let me make it clear.
We're not praise the subject.
Let me make it clear. Mr. President, Senator Charles paid me a compliment this morning about being a good researcher. I would like to help Senator Charles, who says he likes to research. I'd like to tell him, go and look in the monthly report of the Ministry of Finance, published on the website of the Ministry of Finance. Go and look there, and you will see that since September 2016, this has been happening. Go and look at it. Mr. President, you know, and let me share with my colleague senators, that waiver, the country is allowed to give $10 million waiver per month to the sick, the old.
Mr. President, I again rise, and it appears that if I don't raise my voice at the magnitude of my colleague senator, perhaps nobody is shaken. So again, let me ask that my point of order be respectfully considered and that we do not stray from what is before. And I do so with veracity so that it is taken more seriously. A while ago, I am advised that it was accepted, but I hear my colleague continuing again.
Senator Brown, the matter of the Minister of Finance has been laid. Could you just continue with the SOE?
Mr. President, I'm continuing. Let me put in context. I am saying that as part of the fight against crime, we need more resources to the police. That side applauded when the minister said we need growth before we can pay the police more. And I am showing them.
Mr. President, just on a point of order, for the record.
Point of order. Senator Brown.
Senator
Brown.
Mr. President, I'm being misquoted, so allow me to just set the record straight. I am being misquoted, which means the House is being misled. That is my point of order. What I stated in response to the Senator's sort of voce comment was that we need to grow the economy in order to pay all workers what they are worth. And I'm saying that. So please stop misquoting me through you, Mr. Chair.
Including the police. May I continue, Mr. President?
Senator Brown, you may.
I know this is a point. I know that this. really get to the heart of the insensitivity and the uncaring nature of this government. But let me be clear. It is not only this tax waiver that is preventing them from putting more resources at the disposal of the security force. When they sell the assets of the Jamaican people, like the UDC lands at Ocherios for less than valuation, it robs the people. When they go and sell the National Insurance Fund,
on a point of order.
the National Insurance Fund land at Landover.
Point of order, Mr. President.
There's a point of order on the floor.
Mr. President, Mr. President, the member is no longer, Mr. President, he is not speaking to the subject of the debate. Please ask the member, Mr. President, to be relevant as the standing orders provide.
Senator Brown, you heard the allegation. Can you drift back to the main course?
Mr. President, might as well they ask me not to speak, because I'm talking about the state of emergency. I'm talking about the state of emergency. I am talking about how to fight crime better. I have not spoken about the Petrojam wall and these acts of corruption and waste. What I am talking about is the NIF, is the land sold by UDC and the land sold by National Insurance Fund below valuation. Below valuation. When there was a $3 billion bid, they sold it for 920 million. That is what would have put more resources available for fighting crime. That is what we need to do.
Senator Brown.
Yes, sir.
Having made that point, if we could get back to how we started this morning.
How did we start this morning? I thought we started about fighting crime.
Can I finish, Senator Brown?
Sorry,
I do listen to you. Can we just get back to the main issue of that is on the agenda? Okay. Thank you so much. Continue, please.
You know, Mr. President, the leader of the opposition said on Sunday that the government does not know what they are doing. And it sounds to me that when you tell me that the issue of resources for fighting crime is not germane to the debate on the state of emergency, which is aimed at fighting crime, then clearly you don't know what you are doing. And so, the country needs to know, and answers need to be given about the sale of assets below valuation when those resources could be used to fight crime. We see the Mount Salem police station in the Zozo and state of emergency, shut down by the public health authority for lack of resources. But the resources are there. Friends benefiting, but the people of Jamaica not getting the real benefits. Mr. President, as a union officer, I stand with the police force, and I stand with a need for a significant increase. As the spokesperson on the public service, the shadow minister for the opposition, I stand with the police force. They deserve an increase to help us fight crime. I am proud to stand with them. Mr. President, the country needs a real crime plan that goes after the guns and get the criminals convicted. And I asked, as I asked in the last debate, why is it June 3rd, Senator Sinclair, that shootout in Montego Bay in the heart of the state of emergency, where 4 police officers were shot? How comes the man who harbored that criminal has not yet been caught, even though he was declared a person of interest? Even though the police have his motor vehicle, how comes he hasn't been caught? How comes we have not heard any report about him? How comes with these extraordinary powers we can't get them? But a man who did wrong in St. Thomas by giving children pills, we hear his name being called. But what is it about the man from Montego Bay? When initial reports is that the house might have been rented or owned by a minister. I dismiss that. But the reality is, why has this man not been caught? Why? Is it political interference? And so, Mr. President, personally, the opposition is going to support the motion. Personally, I have mixed feelings. I'd have preferred what the Prime Minister said, that measures to relieve the hardship on the citizens of North St. Catherine would come first. If those measures come, I'd be happy to say a strike in the balance. But no, those measures haven't come. Those measures haven't come. And I hope, Minister, you'll be prepared to suspend this debate until next week when we vote, after the Minister makes the announcement. So we are satisfied that the government is prepared to keep their words. Because the reality is, as Dr. Phillips so clearly said on Sunday, a lot of the promises are so-so chat, so-so chat, so-so chat. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Thank you very much. Senator Morrison.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, colleagues. I rise to make a very short presentation. And yes, and I begin by asking the question, how comes? How come? You know, after so many years, we still battle with this crime monster. How come? Plan after plan after plan after plan after plan. And some 24 of the last 27 years, we have all the ideas. How come? What had stopped us from getting all those guns? There must have been challenges, we admit. And we admit that it must have been the same type of challenge that we are grappling now. And probably, yes, even worse. And that is why, Senator Williams, you have some Jamaicans who are saying, you know, the problem that we have with some of our leaders is the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. Because, Mr. President, when we are battling a serious situation as crime, and we are more about playing a blame game instead of fully cooperating in tackling this, people really question the motive. Mr. President, I'm happy that the opposition leader is admitting that the state of emergency is seeing a reduction in murder. And that is what we consider to be very significant. The reduction is not ideal, is not what we would want. Certainly we would want to rid this nation of the scourge of crime and violence. But we are on the right track. The state of emergency, Mr. President, is a strategy included in a broader crime plan. It is one of the tools that we are using to fight rampant criminality. And it makes good sense that if the situation that presents itself shows that you need extraordinary measures, We need to put those measures in place and fight crime. Mr. President, many people like to talk about St. Catherine and Spanish Town. I hear Senator Brown. But there's one thing I have to say, Senator Charles. You see, until when you stand up in Spanish Town bus terminus, I hear them shot fire and you jump on a bus, any bus going anywhere, until when you're in a plaza transacting business and two boys just walk up and kill somebody right in front of you. Until when you're there and you witness a town that should be so vibrant becomes a ghost town. You don't understand Spanish Town. Until when you have felt it. You see, many of us, we live outside of the zone. I live right in there. Many of us live outside of the zone where we have our little gated communities. Many of us operate our business places that close 4 or 5 o'clock. So we don't understand probably the pain and the anguish, and that there are some people who depend on Spanish Town being up and running and functional. And when criminals lock it down, their whole lives and livelihood shut down. So, Mr. President, let me make it very clear that the people in the St. Catherine North Division, the people in the town centers, I live there, they are happy for the state of emergency. They support the state of emergency. Mr. President, I went to a salon 2 weeks ago. A salon 2 weeks ago, right there in Spanish Town. That's where I do almost everything. And yes, to get the hair done. You saw me. So, yes, getting his, it was in the heights of campaign, Mr. President, so he was getting his hair locked. Locked and shampooed. And I asked the question, Mr. President, what do you people think about the state of emergency? Because, from time to time, we have to go to the citizens and find out, how is this affecting you? And she said, listen, to be very honest, we like the state of emergency. There are customers who we haven't seen in months, who, because there is a measure of security, they now feel safe in coming into the town. So they are commending the government. They support the state of emergency, and on both sides, right? Because I do believe both sides want to see a reduction in crime and violence. Both sides want to take back our town centers from criminals. She did indicate, however, can you talk to the Prime Minister for us? Because we would like to have an adjustment in the business hours. It is affecting us. I said, what time you close? She said, by 7 o'clock we have to close. If we could just get a little more time, that's what we are asking for. Give us more time. Good? And no, we're not disagreeing. No, we're not disagreeing. We're not disagreeing. We're not disagreeing. And so the Prime Minister indicated, Mr. President, that indeed is a part of the consideration that he has, because he is realizing that the people, the state of emergency, the state of emergency is seeing a reduction, 1. 2, the citizens are cooperating. And, Mr. President, most importantly, the Prime Minister is saying that he believes in having a partnership with the people. A partnership with the people. So what is happening, Senator Williams, with the state of emergency, right? The people are working with us, and guess what? We are work back with the people. So when we think of our hairdressers, when we think of our barbers, when we think of our shopkeepers, when we think about those who own the bars and the taverns, when we think about the people who have the jerkman out there, of course we have to take them into consideration. The person who is having them round robbing, we're taking them into consideration. We are taking them into consideration. In fact, Mr. President, it was in consideration of these people protecting their rights, their human rights, why we had a state of emergency in the first place. So I am saying to those people in Spanish Town, when those measures are put in place, where the time is extended, we are asking for your further support and cooperation with the security forces. You have been doing very well so far. We must commend the citizens, and we are also getting the results. No, Mr. President, regular police presence, Senator Crawford made mention of it, that has not been proven to be most effective in fighting rampant criminality, Senator Charles. And therefore, the extraordinary measures such as that which comes under the emergency powers, we had to embrace this to tackle the situation that we had. Now we know that a state of emergency, cannot continue forever. And therefore, the appropriate measures will be put in place. And maybe now, Senator Charles, we will have to reconsider what constitutes regular policing so that we can tackle the problem facing us from here on. Mr. President, Senator Brown, of course, he made mention of the fact that despite the state of emergency, that woman in Angels was gunned down. Despite the state of emergency, James Johnson, my very good friend, was gunned down. And I have to ask the question, if the criminals are so daring, so brazen, in a state of emergency, what would happen if we never had a state of emergency? It really begs the question.
That is the question.
That's the question. What would have happened if we never had this? Which shows that the criminals have reached a stage. The criminals have reached a stage where we realize that they are heartless, they are ruthless, and therefore we have to exhaust every measure that is necessary to fight this problem. Now, Mr. President, Mr. President, Senator Charles.
I thought you were supporting Crawford. Watch it to the
This is an opinion that I've been nursing. An opinion that I've been nursing for a while. It's my opinion. That maybe the time has come for us to consider giving or creating more access to the regular, ordinary, honest, decent, hardworking Jamaican citizens, giving them better access and opportunity to defend themselves, their homes, their properties against criminals. Because criminals are armed and dangerous. They walk into any public space, any bus, any plaza, any church, because they know that it is highly unlikely that anyone in that church or anyone in that bus or anyone in that plaza will have the means to take them on. Maybe, Mr. President, we have some serious considerations, serious things to contemplate. as we seek to have our citizens feel safe and feel protected. I hear across the senator is saying about giving guns, and even the whole phrasing of it, I don't like it, about giving guns. It's not about just giving guns wantonly. But citizens do complain that you have gunmen out there, people out there who can just walk in. And yet it is so difficult for a hard-working, honest person to get that opportunity. Mr. President, I look forward to that time when the state of crime and violence in Jamaica, where that will change, so that we can all rise as a nation, grow, prosper, thrive, and take that place that is waiting for us. Jamaica is a beautiful country, Mr. President, so much going for us, so much potential, and we need to tackle this monster so that we can move forward. God bless.
May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Morrison. Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Scott Motley.
I regret that I met James Johnson, because what happened is that he no longer was a statistic. In that room, he demonstrated that he was a vibrant, engaging, conscious young man, and I regret that I met him. When we went into that room on Wednesday night, he told me first off that he was from Clarendon and that he had grown up hearing my name in his household. He went on to tell us all the tales that he had heard, and contrasting me with my then opponent. So you can imagine the punchline, which was, and him is a Labourite. I just cannot accept that one day later, when I saw his photograph, it was because he was dead. He was a young man with a tremendous amount of potential. You didn't need to ask. You know, you meet some people and you know immediately. And it was painful for me, as it was for Minister, as it must no doubt be. I know that Member of Parliament, when I spoke to her this morning, she was broken. And I considered that this morning we were going to be having this discussion. And I wondered what we could learn from his death, since it took place in the heart of the state of emergency, in a place where we consider to be a sanctum, a place that we are safe, church, and where he was going to help others less fortunate than himself. And what I would like to say is that it tells us and reinforces to us just how much of a challenge this nation faces. It should give us pause that this person, this criminal, this murderer, felt safe and comforted to fire 7 shots in the back of this man whose only concern was serving other people. And as we talk about guns, I remember being shocked and dismayed when I realized that in St. James, another place is state of emergency, a group of men drinking. One man leaves, goes for his AK-47, and when he comes with it, he's cut down by a hail of bullets, all illegal guns. And I say that because Senator Morrison says advocates for more decent, upright people getting guns. They were not decent, upright people who were gathered together in St. James. And I raise these two instances because I believe that it demonstrates to us how much more needs to be done. And I, as a citizen, wonder, how did we fail to get it done? I listened to Senator Charles, Mr. President, and I heard the litany of programs. Some started by us, some started by the government. Those programs obviously have failed to take us where we need to go. And it is time that we have a sit down so that we can begin to engage all the persons. The leader of opposition has said the private sector, the public sector, all of us need to be part of this process. And I look forward to the time when there are tangible steps taken to ensure that we are all engaged. Mr. President, I don't count the lives that have been saved, because I think that when we do that, we are really almost undermining what has been achieved. It could have been far more, because with the uptick in crime, we saw the direction in which it was going. I am happy for the reduction in murders. I commend the security forces who I know are suffering. They have done a remarkable job under trying circumstances. And my rising after everybody has spoken is to just make one simple appeal. The government is concerned about growth. Senator Aubin Hill is part of that growth strategy. In St. Catherine and in St. James, we need to also look, as we are saving lives, we need to look at the impact we are having on those of us who are alive. Because small businesses have been so battered and bruised, even as the owners are celebrating the success in the reduction of murder, they themselves are experiencing grave hardship. You know that we depend on the small and medium-sized enterprises to contribute to the growth in this country. But there are entrepreneurs who are losing their homes. There are those who cannot send their children to school because they simply do not have the opportunity to maintain their standard of living because the state of emergency is hurting them. I want us also to listen to the cry of the police, who, because they have been removed from their homes and they have to be in St. James, are saying they can't help their children with homework, that their family life is being disrupted. Because there are always two sides to a coin, and responsible governance means that we have to pay attention to all of that. I hear the applause about the extending of business hours. I am grateful for it, especially as we are going into Christmas preparations. But that call should really not have come from the populace. Any government who is truly in touch with its people would have recognized it and announced it without agitation. That is a natural response to putting people first. I say finally, because I don't think it is necessary for me to delay these proceedings, we are going to support the extension. I say finally that I was happy to hear the Commissioner of Police actually make a statement on this matter. I urge him to speak to the public more. The statement which I heard was that he needed to secure the gains, and he was asking for just beyond Christmas. I think he needs to tell us why. That's right. And I think he needs to tell us truthfully, does he feel confident that he has dismantled the gangs? Does he feel confident that his intelligence has now directed him to where the guns are so we can take them off the street? And so that people like James would not have fallen victim to the cruel monster who took his life. I want to hear, because when we hear, we can feel that we are acting on behalf of the people in a very real and tangible way, with the facts which we can also share with them. So I am grateful that the people of St. Catherine, the poorer people, the people who are in search of that prosperity, that elusive prosperity for them, that they will have an opportunity to be able to earn over Christmas. Mr. President, we really, all of us, every single Jamaican, we want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. We want to get back to Jamaica where we were each other's neighbors and where we were all part of a village. Let us work to achieve that. Our hands are open. We are ready. The people out there, they are ready. If we are called on, we will respond. It takes leadership, if it pleases you.
Senator Reid, was it good?
Thank you very much, Senator Knight. I was distracted. Thank you. I was totally distracted. Thank you, Leader Scott Motley. I was trying to see if they're going to put up a night watchman, or it appears so. Senator Knight, can I have a sec? Senator Knight. It is in fact 1:20. Senator Reid.
Mr. President, the time being 1:20, can we ask for that extension?
Thank you. The question is that the time being 1:20. The question is that the time being 1:20, the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:20 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Your shirt laid yourself scarves shawls as well?
My apologies, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to thank colleagues on both sides for their presentations this morning. Sorry, you did the 120 motion?
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank the Deputy Leader of Government Business for having stood in my stead to ensure that the proceedings for the day could continue unhindered. Mr. President, as we seek to close the debate before us today, I just wish to address two or three matters which were raised by the opposition on this debate. The first thing I want to address, Mr. President, is the argument that because there are reductions in murders being experienced in parishes such as Manchester and St. Anne, this demonstrates that and they are taking place without a state of emergency, that this demonstrates that a state of emergency is not necessary in St. Catherine North. Simply put, Mr. President, this is a fallacious argument. It's unsound reasoning. We give thanks that the strategies of the government and the hard work of the security forces is reaping rewards in places other than where we have a state of emergency, but the conditions in those parishes are not the conditions that exist where the state of emergency were declared. The state of emergency were declared on the advice of the security forces based on the fact that there are particularly abnormal and extraordinary circumstances which endanger the public and accordingly are appropriate for a state of emergency. This is the basis on which they were declared, and this is the basis on which the security forces have recommended that they be continued. It's unsound to say that because we're having successes in some parishes that a state of emergency is not necessary where it has been declared. So I want to just put paid to that. Mr. President, there was an exhortation made to the government by Senator Brown. I believe he said that we should at least aim to be better than the last administration in terms of making successes in this fight, that we should aim to be at least better than. I believe that's what he said. We are, let me assure you. So let me just share some numbers with you. In 2014, there were 534 rapes reported. In 2018, 308, a reduction of 226. In 2014, aggravated assaults, 507, 261 for the year. Year over year, these are comparative periods. 246, reduction of 246. In 2014, 1,557 reports of robbery. In 2018, 761, a reduction of 796. 1,789 break-ins in 2014, now down to 823. Larceny, 322, now down to 115.
Senator Brown,
So
make the minister just do what she's doing. I heard. Hold on. Senator Brown, hold on. Although I wasn't here, I was listening to the
know, that's why I'm raising the point of order in your
You
presence.
had your run. Allow the minister to speak now.
Mr. President.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is that the minister is deliberately misleading this Senate. My issue was about murders.
Senator Brown,
No,
I
let me
believe.
finish.
Hang on a minute, please. Hang on a minute. Can I say something?
Order to that point of order. That is not what he said. And by saying that he's misleading
Mr. President,
the
what is
Senate.
this? What's this? I'm on a point of order.
No, but I could ask you what's this too.
That's what the point of order I'm making.
What you are saying is not a point of order.
You don't think so?
She's
allowed to mislead the country. Thank you, sir.
I'm asking you to allow the minister. I'm asking you to allow the minister to complete her presentation in the same way that Senator Auburn Hill allowed you to complete yours. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, had the member not interrupted me, Mr. President, had the member not interrupted me, I would have continued to say, as I will now, to say that our murders have not come down as much as we want. We want to remove murders. Not going to do, as Senator Charles pointed out earlier, it's not possible to eliminate all crime. It's not possible to eliminate all murder because there is evil in the heart of men. But we're working towards it. And what I'm pointing out contextually, because you have to look at the whole picture, and we have recognized that murders are down. by 20%, close to 20%. Murders are down overall by close to 20%. As I said, we are not where we want to be. We're not where we want to be. But what I'm indicating is that in no less than 5 indicators of criminality, of crime, that affects people's daily lives, we are down significantly over 2014. So the senator made a call to us, and I want to assure him that we hear him and we're working towards it. We are, and we will get there. Mr. President, I think there was also a call that we suspend the debate pending a decision on the hours, the operating hours. But this is not a suggestion that the government will support or that we find favor with. In the same way, there has been a call for suspension to test and then return. There's an arbitrariness to the thinking as to how the fight takes place. The security forces are very rigorous in how it is they determine whether they are going to recommend that these state of emergencies are extended. It's not something that we take lightly. It's not something they take lightly, and in turn we take the decisions in a serious way. The debate is before us today. It is not a simple matter that you can just suspend in some sort of academic concept of what is or is not scientific. We're dealing with people's lives. So I'm going to ask that the Senate support the motion that is before us today. And before I regain my seat, I just want to raise for the record, for Hansard, the matter of our international partnerships. Because I see people want to read into records, media reports which were made without any consultation with the ministry that's in charge of those matters. So let me make sure that in discharging the responsibility with which I have been charged, that we make it quite clear that there is no rift between Jamaica and our traditional partners in security cooperation. Our efforts continue to be strong, friendly, based in mutual respect. There are issues which arise, as there must, between any sovereign nations, and we work them out. We have new partnerships, as we have stated at the very start of our tenure, that part of our foreign policy is to not only deepen and strengthen existing partnerships, but to work on building new partnerships, and those are underway with several partners. We have indicated that our foreign policy will be guided by our national development policies. So where it is that security is one of the 2 highest priorities of this government, then certainly our cooperative efforts with other countries will also include security. This is not at the exclusion or even at the reduction of cooperation with our traditional partners. It is about building additional partnerships. And I wanted to make that pellucid for the Senate today. Mr. President, on that note, I want to ask that the Senate demonstrate our unity against crime and criminality and our recognition that despite the challenges that are inherent in transforming our nation, that are inherent in the imposition of extraordinary measures, that we support the extension of the state of emergency in St. Catherine North and approve the motion of which I gave notice earlier. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the comprehensive response. The question is that the motion be approved. Madam Clerk, please administer the roll call.
Senator Braham?
Yes.
Senator Brown?
With a lot of reluctance, yes.
Senator Charles? Yes. Senator Crawford? Yes. Senator Fraser Binns? Senator Gale? Senator Hill? Senator Johnson-Smith? Senator Knight? Senator Longmore? Senator Morris? Senator Morrison? Senator Reid? Senator Samuda? Senator Scott Motley? Senator Sinclair? Senator Skeffrey? Senator Slowly? Senator Webby? Senator Williams? Mr. President.
It's because you're accustomed to hear me with the microphone. The response was yes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The result is as follows. 19 ayes, no noes, no decline to vote, absent 2 members. So the ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as indicated earlier, the second matter on our agenda today is the Telecommunications Spectrum Regulatory Fees Validation and Indemnity Act 2018. Mr. President, I stand to put forward this bill for consideration by this chamber today. It was tabled in this chamber on the 27th of July and involves validating and confirming the actions of the Spectrum Management Authority. And I'll refer to it as the authority going forward. Mr. President, as you're aware, the Spectrum Management Authority is the regulator with responsibility for managing radio frequency spectrum. In keeping with the provisions of the Telecommunications Act, and specifically Section 26, spectrum users are required to pay regulatory fees to cover the reasonable operating costs incurred by the authority in the exercise of its functions. Mr. President, the first regulatory mechanism was developed in 2003, as a result of which a formula was designed to calculate the regulatory fees which would be levied against spectrum users whose business was entirely dependent on use of spectrum, and they are referred to as Group 2 Level 1 users, like mobile operators. So your mobile phone only operates on spectrum, they're Group 2 Level 1. Pursuant to this formula, however, in 2003, the annual operating budget of the authority was denoted by a fixed figure of $44 million. But since the cost of regulation increases annually, a year after those regulations were passed in 2003, the formula became obsolete. It didn't include a mechanism for annual increase. So to address this issue, and after consultation with the telecommunication operators who were affected, the authority increased the annual operating budget in the formula consistent with the level of inflation as determined by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica for the previous year. And they continued this action from 2004 to 2017, when new regulations were promulgated to give legislative authority to this act, to this mechanism. So, Mr. President, goes without saying that when the new regulations were passed last year, they corrected the situation in respect of the provision for annual increase. Mr. President, it's important to note that the telecommunications operators who were affected by the increased fees concurred with its calculation and they concurred with its imposition. But the fact is that between 2004 and 2017, the increase was done without legislative authority. So in that context, the bill before us seeks to A, validate and confirm as valid, proper and lawful the calculation, imposition and collection of those fees, and B, indemnify the government and all persons associated with the calculation, imposition, and collection of those fees from liability. So, of course, Mr. President, Clause 1 is a short title of the bill, and Clause 2 provides a definition for the word authority, recognizing the Spectrum Management Authority, and it simply adopts the definition as stated in the Telecommunications Act. And Clause 3 provides for the validation of the actions taken by the authority, specifically declaring that the calculation and collection of spectrum regulatory fees from the 1st of April 2004 to the 22nd of March 2017, when the regulations were passed, was validly, properly, and lawfully made and done. The clause also frees, acquits, discharges, and indemnifies anyone who is liable to be proceeded against from liability. In addition, Mr. President, out of an abundance of caution, this clause saves any payments which are due to the authority during the period in question, although, to the best of the authority's assessment, there are no such funds outstanding. But it provides that unpaid regulatory fees validated by the bill remain due and payable. Mr. President, I recommend the bill to this chamber for its support and approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Brown.
I believe, let me say, the opposition supports the validation. However, some comments need to be. This bill comes in the name of the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, and that would have been Andrew Wheatley. Why we support this, we wonder who really is the now Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. We assume that the memorandum of objects and reasons would be supported by whoever now acts as that minister. We don't think it would invalidate it, but clearly one would have hoped that by the time this bill arrived at the Senate, the minister would be clear who is the minister responsible for this. I believe that might have been the last bill piloted by Andrew Wheatley in the House. But that's a long time ago. That's July. And still no clear Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. And the country needs to know, because we were told the Prime Minister was just overseen for a while. We have a system of cabinet government with people being held accountable. It can't be that the Prime Minister needs to shuffle the Senate 13 to get a new minister. I'm sure within this 13 or within the 33 elsewhere, you can find a minister.
Promote Burnett. Promote Burnett. Yeah.
So that's an issue which with which to raise. But you want Burnett to get it?
Yeah. He's a scientist and a lawyer. Good you.
Mr. President, you would be aware. You would be aware because you sat on this side when in 2012 another validation bill came up. I said then, while I sat over there, I didn't like these validation bills.
Yes, consistent.
Just like Arthur Williams used to say.
No, you said it all the time, so maybe you don't have to repeat it again.
No. This is why I need to repeat it, because you're all not hearing it. You're all not hearing it. So I must say it until you hear it.
And you see the date.
These validation bills.
And you see the date it coming from, though.
So I said then, Senator Gale outside, he jibed me and said, oh, you're Mr. Good Faith. Try to create a nickname, Good Faith. I don't like these Good Faith bills, because at the heart of these Good Faith bills is a failing on the state to to act within the law. As clause 3 says, 3.3 says, action which was unauthorized, unlawfully done, or otherwise illegal or improper. That's what we're freeing people from now. But the citizens of the country had their money taken from them without the authority of the law. There have been several of these validation bills, be it backsite, telephone, etc., where the citizens are treated not in accordance with the law, but the power of the government to impose these taxes, cess, or fees without the authority that is required in passing of legislation. And I raise this because if we believe in the rule of law, then we must do things lawfully. If we believe in the rule of law, we must do things lawfully. Errors will be made, yes, but 2003 to now, not corrected. Where is the audit to find that you are making collection that you are not authorized to do? The state, this happened across both parties now. This happened across both parties. And that's why I started by saying, when I sat over that side, I was critical of the bill brought by my government. I am consistent, as the president has said. No, he must thinking about MT's tax waiver. Thinking about MT tax waiver. So, the rule of law is important, Mr. President. And we need to make sure that every legislation that impacts the people are done in such a way that they are lawful. And we don't have to come back later on to make the correction. And I say this, Mr. President, because coming right after this, just like Hurricane Florence and Isaac coming after each other, we know another one coming. Laid on the table today is the Transport Authority validation. So they too are taking money that they're not legally allowed to take. And we have the power in the Senate to say, though you were wrong, you are now free. You are free. We need to avoid that. We need to avoid it. And as senators, we must stand with the citizens first, so that the laws that are passed gives the authority. And we must stop assuming that we have authorities that the Parliament has not given us. And you see, if we continue to breach this and encourage a culture of disrespect for the legal status in the country, then what will happen is that the citizens will eventually suffer. I give you an example, Mr. President, because this leads to abuse. Senator Reid, in June I signed an agreement with an agency under your ministry for payment by the end of June. September, no payment make it. Because somehow the authorities feel that they don't have to abide by the rule of law. Mr. President, it would shock you to know that because government authority in our country don't abide by the rule of law, and Senator Gale and Senator Ransford, listen to this. An employment contract was terminated recently because the lady rejected sexual advance from an authority in government. Yeah. Because such a person, like governments, believe that they're above the law. So in Portland, that lady lost her job because she, and I have the WhatsApp messages. The salacious WhatsApp messages. She lost her job because a former candidate, a councillor who sits on a board, felt that he was bigger than the law. Thankfully, he has stepped down from all board position, Senator Williams. Recently, because the union, I'm told, raised the matter with Minister Tufton. And I've seen Minister Tufton reply saying, without prejudice, this person has stepped down. But when you bring these validation bills over and over, the culture it sends to the state is that we are above the law, we can do things that are not lawful. Senator Gale, 7 cases recently come to me where people contract in the government service is being abused because the culture of we are above the law exists, which is what you're asking me to do when you ask me to validate these good faith legislations. So we need to find a way to stop it. I spoke earlier of 2 land deals. I won't go over them again. But it's clear to me, Mr. President, clear to me that something needs to be done. Somebody needs to be held accountable. Instead of saying in good faith, inadvertence, somebody must have failed to put Senator Webby the provision in the law to ensure that the action would be correct from then. So we can retroactively know as senators correct the wrongs of decades. What incentive does it give to anybody to obey the rule of law? That's my concern. I will squeeze my nose. I'll support this one again, as I have the others before me. But Minister, as Senator Arthur Williams used to say when he was in opposition, let's make sure every law we pass in the Senate, we don't rush it through. We make sure that the legal authority is there for what we are saying the authorities must do to do. Sometimes it comes from the east. And east, they say make waste. Our job as legislator is to make sure we get it right the first time. Isn't that a private sector thing? Get it right the first time so we avoid waste and reworking. Am I correct, my friend Senator Webby? That's what I want to see us do. Get it right the first time. And this applies to both political parties. So it's not a thing against the JLP or against the PNP. It's not a thing against civil servants. But let's aim as a target to put the need for validation bills behind us. Because what it does is allow for what happened in Portland, where a lady lost her job because she refused sexual advance. It's bad. And that's recently. As I said, no, because you see, Senator Braham, it is a former candidate for the House of Representatives. It is a councillor.
Mr. President, it must be inappropriate for a matter like that to be brought here, Mr. President. I mean, the people would know there has not been any conviction, whether in a tribunal or a court as yet. It is not appropriate. Something tells me that it sounds wrong.
Senator Brown knows that it's not appropriate either. He knows it. It might not strictly be in breach of the standing order, in breach of the standing orders, but he knows that it is inappropriate. He knows it, and the whole of Jamaica see it and know it too.
You know, Mr. President, I feel like Dianne Feinstein. In the Me Too movement era, Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, in the Me Too movement era,
Senator Brown, don't go down this rabbit hole. Just continue, man.
But you just made an accusation that I know better.
I never made an accusation. It's not an accusation, you know. I say you know it is inappropriate. It's not an accusation. You know it. And may I tell you, so you know it because you're a sensible JC old boy. So you know it. So just stick to the script. Don't run down no rabbit hole. Just finish off the please to the time at 2 o'clock. Come now, man.
Mr. President, I won't be drawn by them.
Senator Brown.
No,
There's a time. You say what you. I just make an observation. No, man. I make an observation.
No, you're speaking.
Hear the observation I'm going to make, and I don't want to sound as if I'm gender insensitive. Sometimes people who don't play cricket don't know which ball to leave alone, you know. And they talk and they play every ball because they don't play cricket. You and I used to play cricket at various levels. So I just left that ball and move on, man.
That's what I want to do, but my friend Ronnie thought that somehow he should play after the ball. And get caught. I am moving on. Mr. President, I'm moving on. Suffice it to say, the culture of wrongdoings is alive and well in governments. And the example we set when we gladly validate the wrongs of the past is to open others so minded to do wrongs in the present. May it please you. Did I bat good, sir?
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I never played cricket.
Take my guidance concerning the cricket,
Mr. President.
She played netball.
And there were
different rules.
There were comments made which at another time I might have sought to meet them. But the day is what it is. And in that context, I'm simply going to state that the value in a validation bill is to address where it is that rules have been breached, that legislative authority has been breached, to ensure that persons who acted in good faith are protected when that matter is regularized. It is not something to be encouraged, but it is a necessary action to ensure the legitimization, or rather the regularization of activity. So noting circumstances where regulations have corrected the formula in relation to the actions of the Spectrum Management Authority, so the matter has been regularized, and that all that remains to the Senate is to ensure that actions taken, and in this particular circumstances, not only in good faith, but with the concurrence, with the express agreement and consultation of the parties against whom the fees were levied, that in those circumstances, Mr. President, I ask that the bill be reread a second time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favor? Against? Madam Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm as Lawful the Imposition, Calculation and Collection of Spectrum Regulatory Fees in good faith and inadvertent as to the imposition, calculation and collection of such fees being invalid, improper or without lawful authority during the period commencing on the 1st day of April 2004 and ending on the 22nd day of March 2017. To indemnify the government and all other persons from liability in relation thereto and for connected matters, read a second time.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you, Marshal. I put clause 1 of the bill. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put clause 2 of the bill. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put the preamble. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Ayes have it. Mr. Marshall. Thank you. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment.
Mr. President, might the bill be read a third time?
Those in favor? Against? Madam Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm as Lawful the Imposition, Calculation and Collection of Spectrum Regulatory Fees in good faith and inadvertent as to the imposition, calculation and collection of such fees being invalid, improper or without lawful authority during the period commencing on the 1st day of April 2004 and ending on the 22nd day of March 2017, to indemnify the government and all other persons from liability in relation thereto and for connected matters, read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Thank you very much. And just before I do that, I'm going to ask Ms. Smith, would you stand up for me, please? Ms. Sonia Smith joined the staff of the Parliament some years ago as an attendant, and she has now been promoted. She is now an acting orderly of the chamber. So I ask you to... Thank you very much. The question is that the Senate be adjourned. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.